Ruth stood frozen in the doorway, her heart racing as Madame Agnes' voice sliced through the hair like a whip. "Don't you ever enter that room!" Her voice was sharp, unyielding, so unlike the kind, composed woman Ruth had known for the past month. "Ma, I didn't enter your room," Ruth stammered, feeling her palms grow sweaty. A rat I was chasing ran in the air, and I was just standing at the door. "I didn't go inside, I promise." Madame Agnes' eyes softened for a moment, and the anger on her face ebbed, like storm clouds clearing to reveal the sun. "Eh?" she sighed, rubbing her temple. "I'm sorry I yelled, but please, Ruth, remember what I told you. Don't go near that room, okay? Clean everywhere else." Then, as if nothing had happened, Madame Agnes flashed her usual beautiful smile, the same smile that had enchanted Ruth from the day they first met, and walked away, leaving Ruth standing there, her heart pounding in her chest. Ruth watched her go, her mind swelling. What could be inside that room? Why was Madame Agnes so protective of it? Her thoughts drifted to the day she met Madame Agnes, a day that had felt like a turning point in her life. It had been a scorching afternoon, and Ruth was walking down a busy street, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She had just been turned down for yet another job, this time as a cleaner at a small office. Overqualified, they said. Ruth could still hear the condescending tone in the manager's voice. "What does that even mean?" Ruth muttered to herself, wiping sweat from her brow. "How can you be too qualified to clean?" She had graduated with first-class honors, but every high-paying job she applied for rejected her for lack of experience, and now, even low-paying jobs were slipping away from her fingers. She was so lost in thought that she didn't see the black car speeding towards her until it was too late. The sound of screeching tires jolted her out of her daze, and she stumbled, falling to the ground as the car swerved. Her heart pounded in her ears, and her body trembled with shock. She began to cry. "Are you okay?" a voice called. Filled with concern, Ruth looked up to see a beautiful woman emerging from the back seat of the car. Her eyes were wild with worry as she hurried over, kneeling beside Ruth. "Are you hurt anywhere?" the woman asked, her hands gently checking Ruth for any injuries. "I'm fine," Ruth replied, though her voice was shaky. It's been a tough day." The woman smiled, her face full of warmth. "I'm glad you're okay. It's dangerous out here. What's going on? You seem upset." Ruth hesitated, then sighed. "I've been applying for jobs, any job really, but no one will hire me. I just got turned down for another one." The woman's expression softened. "I just moved into town recently and could use some help around my house if you're interested. I could offer you a job." Ruth blinked in surprise. "You would? Really?" "Of course," the woman replied, her smile widening. "My name is Agnes. Come by my place tomorrow, and we'll work out the details." Ruth's life changed after that fateful encounter. Madame Agnes' house was like something out of a fairy tale, elegant with finely crafted furniture and art pieces that looked like they belonged in a museum. But more than that, Madame Agnes treated Ruth kindly, like a friend, not just a housekeeper. She was always so warm, thoughtful, and surprisingly humble, despite her immense wealth. Madame Agnes only had 3 employees: Ruth, Sulaimon the driver, and Kunle the gate man. It struck Ruth as odd that someone living in such a grand home would employ so few people, but she figured Agnes liked her privacy. The job wasn't difficult, and the pay was more than Ruth could have hoped for. Ruth had always assumed someone with so much wealth would be cold and distant, but Madame Agnes was warm and often asked about Ruth's family, even offering to help however she could. "Madame is wonderful, honestly," Ruth had gushed to Suleiman, the driver, and Kunle the gate man. Over lunch one day, she promised to help me pay for my siblings' school fees and even said she would help me save for a better place to live. "I can't believe how lucky I am." Suleiman nodded. "Madame is different. She's not like the rich people I've worked for before." Kunle added, "She treats us well, and that's for sure." Ruth called her mother later that evening. "Mama, you won't believe it. Madame Agnes is like a dream come true. She promised to help me with everything. I think things are finally looking up for me." She beamed, feeling lighter than she had in months. One afternoon, Ruth found herself watching Madame Agnes peel an apple in the kitchen. Her hand moved gracefully until the knife slipped, nicking her finger. "Ma, you're bleeding," Ruth exclaimed, rushing to grab a cloth. But when she looked again, there was no blood. Madame Agnes glanced down at her hand and laughed lightly. waving Ruth off. "Oh, Ruth, you saw wrong. I didn't cut myself." Ruth frowned. She was sure she had seen a drop of blood just a second ago, but Madam Agnes was already smiling, dismissing her concern with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. Ruth swallowed her confusion, but something about that moment stayed with her, like a nagging thought she couldn't shake. One night, Ruth awoke to a dry throat. She slid out of bed quietly, heading to the kitchen for a glass of water. As she passed the forbidden room, a soft sound made her stop in her tracks. Crying. The faint, sorrowful sound of someone crying came from behind the door. Ruth's heart began to race. She stood frozen for a moment. The memory of Madame Agnes' warning echoing in her head never entered her room. Her hand twitched towards the doorknob, but then she shook her head. "No," she whispered to herself, stepping back. "It's better to be tasty for one night than to lose my job." She hurried back to her room, her pulse pounding in her ears, and tried to block out the sound of the sobs that lingered in her mind long after she crawled into bed. Days passed, and Ruth grew more suspicious of Madame Agnes. It wasn't just the strange incident with the apple, or the mysterious crying at night. There was something else, something about Madame Agnes herself. No matter what happened, no matter how dangerous or painful the situation seemed, Madame Agnes never had a mark on her. One day, Suleiman the driver had a terrible accident. A truck fell and bashed the side of the car while Madame Agnes was inside. The force of the impact let everyone sure that whoever was on that side would be seriously injured, or worse. But when Madame Agnes stepped out, she was completely unscathed. When Ruth heard this, her stomach knotted. Suleiman, on the other hand, had visible bruises and cuts all over his body. It didn't make sense. Ruth's curiosity became unbearable. One rainy afternoon, while Madame Agnes was out shopping, it was late and Ruth had just finished cleaning the kitchen when she heard it again, the faint, sorrowful cries coming from the forbidden room. Her heart raised as the sound reached her ears. The cries were soft, almost pitiful, and Ruth's chest tightened with each passing second. She had heard them before, late at night when the house was quiet, but she had always ignored them. But this time, she couldn't. The memory of Madame's strange behavior, the odd way she seemed to avoid injury, flashed through her mind. Just a quick peek, she whispered to herself, wiping her sweaty palms on her apron. No one would know. Ruth tiptoed towards the forbidden room, every step heavy. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob, her breath catching in her throat. The door creaked open and Ruth stepped inside. The room was dim, filled with a thick, unsettling silence. Her eyes adjusted to the gloom, and then she saw it. A portrait. It hung on the wall, larger than life. But what caught Ruth's attention was the painting, another version of Madame Agnes, but with scars, bruises, and signs of weariness. Ruth had stopped. What was this? She stepped closer, eyes widening as she took in the painful expression on the woman's face in the portrait. Suddenly, the door behind her creaked open. Ruth turned sharply to see Madame Agnes standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "Why did you do this?" "Why, Ruth?" she whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. "Why did you come in here?" Ruth felt her blood run cold. "Ma, I needed to know. What's going on? What is this room? Who is this woman in the portrait?" Madame Agnes' body shook with sobs as she dropped to her knees. "You weren't supposed to see this," she cried. This is my curse." "Your curse?" Ruth whispered, her throat tightening. Madame Agnes looked up, her eyes filled with despair. "This portrait, it's me, my true self. Every injury I have, every sign of aging, everything that happens to me, happens to the woman in the portrait instead." Ruth's hands trembled. "But how?" "I've been doing this for centuries," Madame Agnes explained, her voice barely audible. "I use the youth and beauty of women like you to sustain myself. When their time runs out, they take my place in the portrait and I move on, renewed, untouched. You, Ruth, you next." "No," Ruth cried, stumbling backward. "Please, no, I won't tell anyone, I swear, just let me go." But it was too late. The room began to shift, the walls closing in around her. The portrait expanded, the woman's eyes locking onto Ruth as if drawing her in. Ruth screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. As the portrait returned to its original size, a faint cry could be heard from within. It was Ruth's voice, pleading, sobbing, trapped in the canvas, just another victim in Madame Agnes' never-ending circle of youth and beauty. Hey besties! Thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate your support. I don't take it for granted. If you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Please subscribe already. On this channel, I currently have a membership program going on, and it's just for a little fee. You get exclusive perks that not just anybody gets. You get to tell me the kind of stories, titles, topics you want to see, and I take them as priority. You also get to be the first person to see my new uploads before any other person, and sneak peeks of my behind the scenes projects. So anytime you're waiting for a new video and I haven't uploaded, just check out my other videos. I'm sure you'll find something you like. And as always, I'll see you in my next video. Bye besties! Mwah.